Welcome to the weekly movie throwdown. I'm Mike Messinio.
And I'm Steven Sigmund.
This week, we continue with Jason Statham month, and we got a good one this week. 2015 comedy action movie, Spy, written and directed by Paul Fieg, starring Melissa McCarthy, and of course, with a fantastic supporting role, Jason Statham.
Tell me where the bomb is. 10 seconds or you're dead.
Interesting. I'm the only one who knows where that nuke is.
Well, then in that case, I'd say you'd better start.
Oh my God, why did you do that?
I didn't do it on purpose. There's like a ton of pollen in here.
When I quit teaching and joined the CIA, I thought I was going to be this amazing spy, and I'm still just the same boring person I was.
You play it too safe.
I just hear my mom's voice. Just blend in, let somebody else win. Making a wave isn't always brave.
Brilliant.
Give up on your dreams, Susan. Just to write that in my lunchbox.
We've intercepted chatter that Rayana Boyanov knows where that nuke is. She knows the identity of all our agents. We need someone to find the bomb without being detected, but it can't be any of you. We need someone invisible.
I'll do it.
Okay. Thanks, lunch lady.
I'm serious.
Don't let me down, Cooper.
I will not. I will let you up.
Stop talking.
I will let you up.
We're giving you a new identity. You will no longer be Susan Cooper. You're Henny Morgan, divorced housewife from Iowa.
It's a confidence builder.
You really think you're ready for the field?
Damn it! Who puts a roof on a scooter? What are you, the Pope?
Yeah, he's something else in this. It's really fun to see him expand a little bit. And I think, we talked about this a little bit. He's better than we remember. Like, genuinely funny at a lot of points.
Yeah, I'll admit that in my memory, it just kind of felt like Statham being Statham and everyone being funny around him. But on the rewatch, he has actual comedy chops. And I was surprised at how good his comic timing was and how willing he was to play the fool and really play off the persona that we know of him. And that, in a way, is why it's so funny, because we expect X from him. And then he gives us a twist on it where he's not actually good. We're not really sure he's actually good at anything that he's doing. He just really talks like he is. And that makes it really fun to watch.
He reminded me of The Rock and Samuel L. Jackson and the other guys. They just have this elevated bravado that is completely out of place with reality. And,
that's really funny you brought that up, because I was thinking that too. At first, when I was watching this, I went back into the rewatch and I thought, well, this was, it was a really good time, for action comedies, this, 2010 to 2016 period. And then, of course, I looked a little closer and realized I was totally wrong. There were a bunch of awful action comedies that came out. There's only like 5 of them that were genuinely good. The other guys, this one, 21 Jump Street was actually, I think, pretty underrated. And Central Intelligence, which I also really liked. But, you also have garbage like The A-Team and Baywatch and all kinds of not good stuff. So on the whole, bad. But yeah, other guys in this one both do a really good job of playing off of what we expect from action movies and tweaking it enough to kind of show you how absurd it is, but actually playing it straight in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's heart to it, and there's a lot of real action in it. It's not just pure comedy. Like, I think the other guys is more comedy than action in a way, but this is more kind of it's kind of both, kind of 50-50, I think. And credit to Paul Fieg, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, but wanted to make a James Bond movie, knew they would never let him, so he decided to create his own and put his own spin on it. And he's pretty prominent in this time. He actually worked on a few of those action films that we didn't mention from the era, and we'll get into that. But why don't we just break down what this film is about before we jump in and let everybody know what we're talking about today. The synopsis is basically that Melissa McCarthy plays Susan Cooper, kind of an unassuming desk agent for the CIA. who spent her career kind of being the sidekick to someone in the field, played by Jude Law. He's this guy, could possibly be James Bond himself. Very suave, very cool. But he goes missing, and then a bunch of other CIA operatives are exposed. Very Mission Impossible with the knock list, all the identities of the agents. And because Melissa McCarthy's character has been literally in the basement for her entire career, nobody knows who she is. So they send her into the field to bring down the arms dealer behind this whole plot. There's also a nuke involved. That's her main thing, is getting this nuke back. And she sort of finds herself in this pursuit, which is really cool. I mean, that's kind of the heart behind it, is that she finds this confidence, and there are a lot of laughs around it. But I really like that there's sort of a sweet and nice theme to it, and she does a good job with it.
So that's a really good synopsis. So where does Statham come in all this? So Statham's character name is Rick Ford, which is a great spy name. So he plays the agent, the blustering agent who kind of thinks that she's out of place, doesn't know anything, and he basically quits because he wants the job, but doesn't really quit, because then he just shadows her throughout the entire movie, thinking that he's trying to fix what she's doing wrong, but keeps messing things up. And then she has to constantly keep saving him, which is a through line throughout the movie.
It's pretty great. I mean, he's really playing against type, and is just a fly in the ointment the whole time. And it really makes you question whether the things that he's talked about doing in the past actually happened. In fact, Melissa McCarthy's character questions them the whole time, but he really brings the absurdity in a way that he doesn't in like Crank, which I would say is probably the closest thing to comedy that he's had.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because as I was looking into this and reading stuff about it, it turns out that the reason that Paul Fieg knew, like, the question was, well, can Jason Statham do comedy? And in his mind, he thought, well, of course he can, because he had seen Crank. So basically the reason Statham got this part was because Fieg had seen Crank and knew, based on just the absurdity of that movie, that Statham could absolutely play comedy. And that's why he brought him on. So, good job by us for connecting these movies back to back. So turns out one kind of led to the other.
And I read that Paul Fieg was once an aspiring stuntman, which is like mind-blowing to me. But you do see him in the background in the hotel in Rome walk into a wall as a drunken patron. So there's a little bit of stunt action there. But yeah, that he loves the stunts, and he knew Statham did them in Crank, and knew that it was funny, brought him on, and wrote the part for him.
What I realized as well, Jude Law and Statham both did a lot of their own stunts in this. And it turns out, like, Jude Law does kickboxing and is pretty good at doing physical stuff. So, both of the stunt coordinators had high praise for both of them in terms of what they could do and handling their own stunts. But again, and this has come up before with other people who talk about Statham, where they talk about how not only is he great at doing the stunt work, but he has an uncanny ability to know exactly what will look best on camera. And a lot of filmmakers actually defer to him on set in terms of how to block out scenes, because he has an innate sense of the proper way to frame something and make it look good on camera. And this was mentioned with Beekeeper. David Ayer talked about it. And in listen to filmmakers talk about Spy, they mentioned the exact same thing. And I think that's a bit of an underrated quality that Statham has, that he's a very good eye for how to frame his own action scenes to make them look best.
That's amazing. From a street seller in England to an Olympic diver to an action director, basically, or action choreographer. Wow, what a trajectory. It's pretty great. And he actually, Melissa McCarthy too, a very physical actress. I don't know that she did all of her stunts here. In fact, I read quite a bit of things where her stunt woman was clearly in frame because she had different shoes on in a lot of the scenes. But I think she probably had a good hand in it as well with the physicality. I mean, we learned from all of her films that she's very like out there physically and doing a lot of stuff. So yeah, just an all around physical film, and it shows. It was really good.
Yeah, she she obviously had a stunt double and a few scenes, you can tell, but the scene in the middle of the movie where she has the knife fight in the restaurant is mostly her, and they block that out, and she does a lot of the work in that scene, and you can see it because you see her face most of the time. So that stuff she actually did.
And that scene is interesting. I mean, it's almost like a Hong Kong film, and very James Bond too. That's what I wrote in my notes when I was watching.
You mentioned Jackie Chan specifically, and so I think that was definitely in their mind as they were doing it. Because who's the king of doing practical comedy action with Jackie Chan, who basically is the blueprint for that. So I think it was very much an homage to Jackie Chan in terms of how that was framed. Like she's using pieces of bread and broccoli and stuff, like whatever she can get her hands on. Just the chaos and absurdity of it is very Jackie Chan.
It seems like that scene, I mean, we'll get to it, but it seemed like that scene had so much care put into it as an homage that it really stood out. But I guess we should maybe start from the beginning and just kind of get into the film as a narrative. I think it's important to look at Paul Feig's career a little bit in the lead up to this. He kind of came on the scene working with Judd Apatow when Freaks and Geeks, which is beloved by everybody.
We'll stop there and just say that Freaks and Geeks, in my opinion, along with My So-Called Life going back a few years before, were probably two perfect seasons of television that were both completely done wrong by networks and canceled. But when you go back and look at Freaks and Geeks, just look at the people involved in it, and it's genuinely shocking how many people involved with Freaks and Geeks in some way have gone on to have huge careers. All of the stars, people that had bit parts. You look at people that were cast in just random episode characters. A lot of those people end up going on to big work. And you have Apatow and Paul Fieg as co-creators who go on to own comedy in movies in the next 2 decades. So it's a fascinating show to go back and watch just to see where they both came from and how all these people were involved in one television show. It's really something to behold 25 years later.
And it was such a short-lived show. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, not to get off on a Freaks and Geeks tangent anymore, but there was like 13 episodes. They didn't even air all of them, and it's considered one of the best shows of the last like 25 years. It's really interesting. It goes to show you that there's no accounting for taste, I guess. People didn't watch it, and well, thank goodness for streaming. I guess they're all discovering what they missed. I don't know.
But we could spend 12 hours talking about shows that I'm angry that were canceled by network television, but we won't get into that.
But that's kind of Paul Feig and Judd Apatow met on a film called Heavyweights in 1995, in which Feig acted. Actually, I guess he started as an actor, but then he went on to direct one film, I Am David, in 2003, and then also did Unaccompanied Minors, which is pretty great. But then did a real run of television, and the stuff he was involved in with television was pretty incredible. I mean, Arrested Development, Mad Men, Parks and Rec, The Office, 30 Rock, and the list goes on and on. So what a career on the small screen. And then, gets together with Kristen Wiig and puts out Bridesmaids in 2011. And that just changed everything.
Yeah.
I mean, for him and for comedy and for women.
Yeah, and this is the 3rd out of 4 movies that he made with Melissa McCarthy, starting with Bridesmaids. So they made Bridesmaids, and then they made The Heat in 2013 with Sandra Bullock, which is another movie that's really good on the rewatch. I really enjoyed that movie. And then this one, and then I didn't even know how to talk about the Ghostbusters reboot, which involves a whole bunch of kind of gross misogyny, which we won't get into. So it's almost hard to even talk about that movie on the merits. But actually, pretty decent movie. It's just jumbled in a whole bunch of culture war garbage that sunk that movie.
That's kind of what Feig became known for, sort of a modern day George Cukor, a women's director. And that run with Melissa McCarthy in particular is just like the early to mid 2010s were all about Paul Feig and Melissa McCarthy, and I mean she delivers all the time. She actually got nominated for an Oscar for Bridesmaids, so it's pretty amazing that relationship and how it led to this. And I'll say that this film is a little different than the others for her. We still haven't really gotten into the plot, but I'll say that her character is someone who's very meek for the first half of the film, and sort of slowly discovers her confidence as she's out in the field being a field agent. But then she kind of turns into the same character from those other three films with that level of bravado and just assertiveness that is, I mean, it still works, but I kept finding myself thinking, oh, this is the character from The Heat now.
Well, in this one, though, it's kind of a character that she puts on, though. It's a persona, because she realizes that's the way she has to be to save her life. But yeah, I mean, for me, and for many people's first exposure to Melissa McCarthy was on the Gilmore Girls, where she plays just the sweetest, nicest person. And so seeing her in Bridesmaids was a jarring change, where you didn't realize that she had that in her, but also just how fantastically funny she can be. And so this one kind of melds the two, where you get both sides of her, where you get the soft, nice side, and then the character that we've come to know from watching her in movies. So that's kind of why I enjoyed it.
Maybe we can get into the plot a little bit. The premise is that there's a nuclear bomb on the market. Basically, it's kind of lost, and the film opens with Jude Law's character, Bradley Fine, and he always says, "Who's the finest of them all?" every time he kills someone, which is pretty great. I mean, the tone is set right away when he first just throws a champagne glass in the middle of a room, but then he has his sights set on the main villain and his allergies kick in and he accidentally shoots him in the head.
Yeah, it's a kind of a perfect recreation of an opening Bond sequence.
Yeah.
Until he sneezes. And
right.
Then you realize what movie you're actually involved in.
And then it goes into Bond-like opening credits. So it's clear that it's very much an homage to that franchise. So yeah, the bomb is on the market. As we said, these CIA operatives are compromised. And the head of the CIA, or the head of the department, who's played by Allison Janney, a fantastic role for her, just kind of an asshole at least to Melissa McCarthy's character.
Yeah, this is a great part by Allison Janney that plays into her in a similar way to Melissa McCarthy in some ways, where she started off, we know her from The West Wing, she was a serious actress, and then kind of around 2010, she starts doing a little more comedy, and you find that she's really great at doing dry comedy work. I mean, she started working on Mom in 2013 as well, that sitcom. But yeah, she has a wonderful dry sense of humor and can play street comedy with the best of them.
She's really good in this. Not too many scenes, but when she's there, she's really just kind of not stealing the scene, because I don't know how you can do that from Melissa McCarthy, but holding her own for sure. And so she reluctantly sends Melissa McCarthy into the field.
So there's two running gags that kind of go through the movie. The first of which is her funny CIA aliases that they give her. And the other one is that because all the non-field agents work in a basement that's just infested with rodents. And so the running gag throughout the whole movie is that as they're trying to do their job in the basement, there's like bats flying around, and like there's mice on people's shoulders, and just random things where if you look enough in the background, you see all rodents and things going around, which is really one of my favorite running bits. I laughed every single time that happened. It never got old for me.
Yeah, it's pretty much every shot. There's something, whether it's a bat or a mouse or any other thing you can think of. And that actually reminds me that kind of an unsung hero of the film that we haven't talked about yet is Miranda Hart, who is a British actress and comedian who I think does such a good job here, from working in The Office to actually getting out in the field later. She's sensational, and actually has quite a turn at the end involving 50 Cent, which is pretty good. But yeah, she basically it does the same job as Melissa McCarthy by the end, and is a really good addition. And she calls upon the vermin quite a bit.
Yeah, and develops a relationship with 50 Cent, which is another thing that I wanted to bring up, which is really funny to me because we're talking about Statham kind of playing against type, but 50 Cent also playing against type, where you have two guys that are kind of well known for being macho guys with a lot of bravado, and it kind of both of them turned in pretty surprising comedic performances. 50 Cent's pretty amusing in this movie, I have to say. As far as celebrity cameos go, this was a good one, and I really enjoyed it in it.
I don't know what his status was in 2015 or 2016. I don't pay attention to 50 Cent's career, but I think he was probably a little more prominent than he might be now. So it's good to see him in there and a little surprising.
That is true. The idea that 50 Cent will be playing a party in Budapest or somewhere for fancy people was much more likely in 2015 than it is now.
Yeah.
So we're staying in the office though. So Sam Richardson has a bit part.
Very little.
In the office of one of the people working in the basement. Very small part. And this is kind of before he ends up being in everything, which he has now become kind of a go-to comedy actor. And Zach Woods also makes a really small part.
Yep.
A memorable scene in this movie. And of course, the both of them end up starring in a TV show called The After Party, for Apple TV, which came out last year. They were both in that. But, both of them are the kind of comedy actors that started showing up everywhere. This is pretty early on in both of their careers. So it's always fun to go back and watch older movies and see people at that time before they became people that you see everywhere.
Yeah, I especially love Zach Woods. I think he is a comic genius, and he actually pops up in a few Paul Fieg movies. There are a few people actually who show up here and show up in The Heat and Bridesmaids. Mitch Sipla and Michael McDonald in particular are both people who Fieg seemed to work with a lot around this time.
Much like Apatow, he has like a small stable of people that he'll keep bringing back that he's connected to, which is always really nice to see. And he's got a writing team as well that he keeps, and even though he's credited with writing the screenplay, because of the way that the movie works, he keeps writers on set, and they're constantly writing jokes and throwing off ideas, even in the moment. And I was going to talk about that regarding Jason Statham, a little bit down the road when we get there. Some interesting stuff that I was reading about as we were looking into the movie.
Well, we can get to that now because we left off talking about Melissa McCarthy's character being sent out into the field, and before that happens, there's a CIA meeting where we're introduced to Rick Ford, Jason Statham's character, and that scene bears discussing because it's right out of the gate, you know what you're getting with Statham, and you're like, buckle up because this is going to be crazy. The first thing he talks about is a face-off machine that tells you that's ground zero.
Yeah, where he believes there is a face-off machine and then kind of finds out that they're joking with him. But because his character is so stubborn, he actually thinks that they're lying to him about lying, that there really is one, and they just won't tell him for sure.
I have to say, he's so funny in this film. The only ding I would put on him is it seems like more than one or two lines of dialogue are not what he's used to. So everything is sort of phrased like a haiku with a break, which is interesting.
That is actually what I wanted to bring up. And the reason I'm really impressed with Statham in this. I mean, first of all, he says more words in the 4 scenes he has in this movie than in the entirety of The Beekeeper and possibly the entire trilogy of The Transporter. I mean, there's so much dialogue that he's throwing off, but it turns out as I mentioned before, he has a group of writers that are on set that are constantly writing jokes, do a lot of ad-libbing, but they also do a lot of just joke work in the moment and run with stuff, and then the editor cut out as they go. So it turns out that for most of Statham's scenes, there's someone off camera feeding him these lines.
Oh.
and he's just reciting them. He's just kind of going with it in the moment, and they're coming up with all this insanity that he starts talking about being trapped in a poison factory and all these other things. So they're just throwing him lines off camera, and he's just going with them and running with them. And that may be why you think that it's a little stunted, because he's processing them in that moment and running with them, which that's high level comedy work. I mean, that requires a certain level of processing, and I mean that's because it's the way Fieg works, and he's used to working with a lot of comedy actors, and obviously Melissa McCarthy is as good as it gets at these kinds of things. So I mean, he just steps into this and runs with it, and some of the stuff he ends up saying is truly bonkers. But I don't think any of that was in the script that he actually got. I think that was just stuff at that moment that they were writing for him, figuring out how absurd they could make his character.
That makes so much sense. I mean, it you can feel as you watch it. That was the one thing I noticed. It's like line, pause, line, pause. So yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And
so knowing that, it's even more impressive. The other thing I would say that what everyone should do is get the DVD of this. I know that makes me sound old to say that I'm still watching DVDs, but I don't care. You get the DVD because there's actually a couple of gag reels on the DVD, and you see them. You actually get to see Jason Statham laugh, which is amazing because I've never seen. I don't think I've ever seen that before on camera. So because it's so ridiculous and they're feeding him such stupidity, there's more than one scene where one of them just cracks. So that's really fun to see that he really does have a good sense of humor and it's rolling with them.
That's pretty great. I'll have to check that out. I watched it on HBO Max. So and I don't know if they had gag reels at the end in the credits or not. I turned it off.
No, they don't have gag reels at the end.
Okay.
They have some nice graphics about further missions that she ends up doing and that kind of thing, but no gag reels.
Well, maybe that's how they accommodated for the idea that they wanted this to be a franchise, as well as the Heat. That was kind of Paul Feig's intention with these two films, were two separate franchises, and I guess it didn't work out.
Well, the good news is, if you look it up, there is an entry for Spy 2.
Okay.
IMDb, like it does exist, and there is talk that they were going to start filming it as soon as the end of 2023. That there was talk that it was going into pre-production.
Oh wow!
So the idea of a sequel to Spy is not dead, and that would make sense because apparently Jason Statham only works in franchises now. So I mean, that would make perfect sense that they would make a Spy 2. So don't give up hope. There may still be a sequel to this coming down the pike, which I think we would all be in for.
I think you could almost see this as a prequel to The Heat, because Melissa McCarthy's character in that is almost like the pinnacle of the confidence that she builds in this film. And maybe I like to think that she's so confident that she basically becomes the Statham character and ends up getting fired and has to go to Boston PD. And then becomes the character from The Heat. But yes, sticking with Statham, Melissa McCarthy's character, her name's Susan, we should just say Susan, he quits when it's decided that she's going out into the field. So Statham leaves, reminds them that he knows there's a face-off machine on his way out. And then she goes out in the field and he shows up in her hotel room. And that's where we really get just the perfect scene of him rattling off these lines that we're talking about. It's so insane, the things he talks about, and I started to wonder if they're not things from other movies that he was in, because I know that he did mention he zapped himself with a defibrillator, which he does in Crank 2, but I don't know, and I just watched that, so that's why I remember. But I don't know if he does that any other, or if any of the other things that he talks about happen in any of his films.
I don't believe so. I don't believe that watching his whole family get murdered and then being in a poison eating contest to survive. I don't even think Statham could be in a movie with that stuff. Although I believe he could. It wouldn't surprise me that those were parts of Statham movies. But no, as far as I know, that is not happening.
I just wrote down a couple of the things that he says in the hotel room, and he basically says, "I make it a habit of doing things people say I can't do: walk through fire, water ski blindfolded, take up piano at a late age."
Hey, there's no sweat.
Looks like you're sweating to me.
Jesus! What are you doing in my room?
Well, how did I get into this shitbox hotel room? Because I'm a real spy.
I thought you quit.
We have to stop the sale of a nuclear bomb. And they send in someone who looks like Santa Claus's fucking wife.
Did you forget? I am undercover because you're not supposed to be here.
Well, I make a habit of doing things that people say I can't do. Walk through fire, water ski blindfolded, take up piano at a late age. And I'm gonna take down DeLuca and Rayner and Dudiev. I'm gonna get that bomb back.
Why do you even care what I do?
You really think you're ready for the field? I once used defibrillators on myself. I put shards of glass on my fucking eye. I've jumped from a high-rise building using only a raincoat as a parachute and broke both legs upon landing. And I still had to pretend I was in a fucking Cirque du Soleil show. I've swallowed enough microchips and shit them back out again to make a computer. This arm has been ripped off completely and reattached with this fucking arm.
I don't know that that's possible. I mean, medically.
During the threat of an assassination attempt, I appeared convincingly in front of Congress as Barack Obama.
In blackface? That's not appropriate.
I've watched the couple that raised me explode in a van. I watched the woman I love get tossed from a plane and hit by another plane mid-air. I drove a car off a freeway on top of a train while I was on fire. Not the car. I was on fire.
Jesus, you're intense.
Amazing.
Credit to them for understanding that only someone like him could actually deliver these lines, because more of a if you brought in more of a comedy actor, it doesn't play as funny because you wouldn't necessarily believe that they believe it or that they've done it. But with Statham, and especially after all the other movies he's done, you can believe, sure, like he is very believable to have done any of these things, and you can see it in your head, which is why his casting is perfect and why they ended up writing the part for him, I'm sure.
To speak to that, I think the Peter Serafinowicz character, he plays Aldo, is kind of a good example of that. He's a comedic actor. It's so big that it's too much. But when you have Statham doing it, because you know who he is, it hits perfectly.
Right. It relies on you having a knowledge of Statham in a way that makes that stuff. Well, even if you don't know who he is, you will think the character is great. But if you've watched any of his movies, it's an added wrinkle that makes it perfect. In terms of even all the casting, I mean, this is the second movie that they make with Rose Byrne, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And they talk about that her part was originally written as like a 19-year-old girl. That was supposed to be the part, and she throws temper tantrums, and there's a lot of that in the movie. But when they found that Rose Byrne was available, they love her so much that they decided to cast her in the part, and rewriting it to make it fit her, and they had to figure out what to do with it. And that's where they came up with the accent and the hair and all of that. So they kind of rewrote it around her because they love her, and she's very, I mean, I wouldn't say underrated anymore in terms of comedy because she's done quite a few things, including that Apple TV show with Seth Rogen.
Oh yeah,
the name escapes me, but
Platonic.
Yeah, Platonic. So she's proven her comedy chops over and over. Back here in 2015, I think she wasn't truly appreciated for how funny she can be, and she's wonderful in this movie. The lines that she delivers in that straight face with that accent is so perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it's like linear for the whole film. It doesn't change her demeanor. She gets upset once in a while, but so much better than a 19-year-old, as I'm thinking about what that would be like. It's so much funnier to have a grown woman throwing temper tantrums. And she actually plays, we should say, the daughter of the man Jude Law kills at the beginning. She inherits the bomb. And Melissa McCarthy's whole mission is to find her, just observe and report, basically. But Melissa McCarthy starts building that confidence that we were talking about at the beginning. And so she infiltrates Rose Byrne's character's world, basically. And the two of them together are sensational. I mean, it's really straight man and comedic, I shouldn't say man, straight woman and comedic woman. And they kind of end up being friends in the end, sort of, which doesn't...
It definitely helps that all three, Paul Fieg, Rose Byrne, and Melissa McCarthy had worked on Bridesmaids. I think they developed an understanding of how each other work. And you can see that comfort here because they play off of each other so well.
So the budget for this was 65 million, and I think a lot of that is travel. I mean, there's some great locations in this. I know it was shot in Bulgaria for a bit of it. It's stunning to look at. And
they mentioned, sorry to interrupt, they actually talk about how they filmed most of the movie in Budapest. And they mention how they're like the first big budget movie to actually film in Budapest, but call it Budapest. Whereas lots of other movies use those locations. I think Mission Impossible did some scenes there, and quite a few movies have filmed there, but they make it other places. They make it Italy, they'll make it a different country. They won't actually call it Budapest. And that allowed them a certain level of access to certain locations they were able to use because it was promoting the actual place as opposed to making it somewhere else. So I thought that was a pretty interesting tidbit that I stumbled across.
That's cool. Well, then maybe the budget didn't go to travel after all. Maybe it went to Jason Statham. I don't know.
Well, I mean, they still had to fly a whole bunch of people out to Budapest. So that's
yeah, that's true. But yeah, as it says in the film, it takes place in Rome and Budapest and Bulgaria. So there's some great scenery to look at, and it's a very international feeling film. There's even a Casino Royale moment kind of in this hotel where there's a card game, which Susan promptly gets kicked out of. But just the Bond homages, and they kind of go all the way throughout, which is nice. So yeah, the idea is that she embeds herself with Rose Byrne's character, her name's Rhea, and tracks down this bomb with Jason Statham popping up and getting in the way, completely telling her she's going to mess it up every time, and then proceeding to mess it up himself eventually. And I suppose this is a spoiler, but the thing's pretty old. So we learned that Jude Law's character, Bradley Fine, is still alive, and he's playing a double agent working with Rose Byrne to find this bomb. So he's reunited with Susan at the end, and they meet Bobby Cannavale, who kind of shows up here and there throughout the film. He plays DeLuca, the sort of big bad, and he and Rose Byrne were an item at the time. I guess they still are, I don't know, but they seem to enjoy working together around this time. So maybe that's why he's in there, or maybe why she's in there, I don't know.
Yeah, I believe this was the third movie that they made together around this period of time. And they are married now. I know that for a fact.
Okay.
They did I think they did Adult Beginners like couple years before. And they were both in Annie, the Annie reboot.
Oh.
And then they were in this, I believe. But they had started dating a few years before.
Was that the Cameron Diaz film?
The Annie? I'm pretty sure that I think that she was Mrs. Havisham, if I'm not mistaken. I don't quote me. I'm not perfect on my recollection of Annie reboots.
Well, I remember there was a live one on television too.
That's right. Yeah, not to get too People Magazine about it, but yes. So they're things for the third movie, working together, and they're married, and seem very happy. Good for them. But yeah, so that again, I think that just everyone in the movie has a really a good chemistry, and clearly they have good chemistry because they like each other. So and that comes off that they're a good duo. But he's another guy who has just done fantastic work over the past decade and a half. He's started popping up in more and more things. I think the first thing I saw him in was actually Boardwalk Empire, where he plays a true psychopath. In season 2, he's just nuts. But turns out he's got comedy chops like anybody else, and he holds his own. So he ends up being pretty funny.
He's in one of my favorite films, Chef, with the Jon Favreau film.
Right.
Fantastic in that. So you can imagine where this goes. Susan finds her confidence, and the sale of this nuclear weapon is thwarted, and she becomes a full-time field operative for the CIA. Finds her confidence. I don't know that we have to get too far into detail about the rest of the plot. It's definitely worth watching. It's a lot of fun, and like we've been saying, it's cast really well, written really well. Has what I think is kind of a surprising Rotten Tomatoes score. The critics score on there is 95%, which is amazing to me. The audience score is 78, which is still fantastic, but a 95% critic rating is staggering to me. That's pretty great, and it tells you how good this film is, especially when it was made. I mean, I don't know if it was made today.
And yet I'm not surprised, because I think that people don't appreciate how hard it is to pull off a movie like this and make both things work. And in hearing them talk about it, they were very much conscious of the fact that they were trying to make an action movie and not a comedy. That they didn't want the movie to ever fall in a parody, which is very easy to do. Of course, you think of The Naked Gun and all those kinds of things that they're just played for laughs. And so while they're writing jokes on the fly and while they're playing things for laughs, they were very serious about filming the action in a certain way, but also making sure that the beats of the movie were action movie things, as opposed to just being a movie that was going for jokes all the time. Jokes are embedded within a serious storyline that they're actually trying to tell. And again, I think that's a high level of difficulty to make that work. As we talked about how many bad action comedies came out between 2010 and 2020, I mean, there's only about 4 that I actually like. So it's a fine line to walk. When you have a good script that walks the line well with a bunch of actors who are all cast perfectly for what they're supposed to do, I think this one ranks right up there with the best of the time.
Yeah, I think it sort of finds a sweet spot where some of the other stuff Paul Fieg did at that time, well, I guess there's only The Heat, which was fine, but that leaned more heavily onto comedy, I think. And that maybe sort of did the groundwork for this. But I think this one really just kind of checks the boxes as far as an action film goes, and a comedy, but it's really a good film. I was happy to rewatch it. It had been a long time, and it did pretty well at the box office too. Like I said, the budget was $65 million, made $29 million its opening weekend, and $235 million lifetime. So that's quite a profit that it turned. But its opening weekend, it opened against Dwayne Johnson in San Andreas, which was not quite as good. Spy.
I remember seeing that movie.
Yeah.
That was kind of where I felt like The Rock was just kind of like, yeah, if you send me a script, I'll do it. It's fine.
Yeah, pretty much. That came in second to Spy. Spy took the weekend with 29 million, like I said. San Andreas made 26. Rose Byrne shows up in the third film of the week, Insidious Chapter 3, which made 23 million. Number 4, this is pretty amazing, at $10 million, the Entourage film.
Holy cow, I forgot that even happened. Wow.
Yeah, $10 million. That edged out at number 5, Mad Max Fury Road at $8 million. That's interesting. And on the surface, you would think, how the hell does Mad Max get edged out by Entourage? But Mad Max had been out for a month already. So the fact that it's still number 5 says a lot about it. So yeah, 2 Rose Byrne films opening that weekend. And actually there's another Jason Statham film that weekend called Wild Card, which is one that I don't know that I've ever even seen. But so you have 2 stars of Spy having 2 films opening weekend, which is pretty cool. And
So I was thinking that Central Intelligence actually comes out the following year. So I wonder if The Rock learned after getting San Andreas by this movie, it's maybe more his wheelhouse and should move in this direction. So he ends up making Central Intelligence, which is sort of similar in certain ways.
that would be a good double feature with this, I think. Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a different story, but kind of the same feel, and balances the humor and action a little better than some of the other Rock stuff where he does comedy. So yeah, that's pretty good. All right, I think that's about it for this episode. We've covered Spy. We highly recommend
Well,
it.
hang on, I have a few useless bits of info that I wanted to share about.
Oh, let's hear them.
That I kind of discovered as I was watching this and reading stuff about it. The first was that for this team, well, this was the first of, so he'd done 4 movies with Melissa McCarthy. This is the 3rd one. This is the first one that Paul Fieg actually wrote. Heat and Bridesmaids, he didn't write.
Right.
But this is also the first movie that collectively his team shot digitally as opposed to using film. And then we talked about that with Crank, about starting to use digital cameras. And so this is actually their first time using digital. And they mentioned something that I didn't know that I thought was fascinating as just a nerd about movies that I'll share with all of you. That, we know that digital cameras make images a lot more crisp than film. TV-like almost, where things are very clear and bright. And so one of the things that they do to make it look more like film is they use smoke. Like they'll fill the room with smoke, which deflects some of the crispness of the film and makes it look more like a film with a slightly darker tones as opposed to that bright TV-like image that you get with a digital camera. Actually, that was a really fun thing to learn that I shared with you.
Wow. I think they would just add it in post now and not go practical with smoke.
They actually talked though about having smoke in the room. So in the scene. So that was kind of fascinating.
I like that.
They do all kinds of weird things to bring down the brightness, where they use like balloons that they float to the ceiling, which kind of deflects some of the light, or they'll in the paint walls darker, like all these like little tricks to keep it from looking really bright. And so those are just things that I found interesting. Because I'm not a filmmaker, so I don't know all these little tricks.
Yeah, there are a lot of little things that can be done that you never know about, and they're always pretty fun to hear about. Not things you would think of, but sometimes when they're not done in an editing room with VFX, they're so simple and so just like basic that you are amazed at what they do. I love it. That's my wheelhouse.
and the other thing I wanted to mention is what we're talking about, Paul Feig movies, is he hasn't. I said I hope Spy 2 happens. I hope that they work together again as well. Melissa McCarthy, Paul Feig, and also Jason Statham. I really hope they work together. After seeing this, you see how much potential Statham has to actually do, real comedy if he wants to. And we talked about Beekeeper, how he's moving towards almost less dialogue, but this proves he could certainly do more dialogue, and I would love to see him do a few more movies like this. So I really hope that Spy 2 happens. But another movie that Paul Feig made a few years later is a movie called A Simple Favor, which is a thriller that I don't think a lot of people saw or that aware of, but I highly recommend it. And I won't say anything about it because I think that you just need to see it and experience how it goes. But supposedly they're working on a sequel to that as well. So those are two things that I kind of hope. I'm not huge on sequels, but those are two movies that I would be more than happy to see sequels of.
I'm trying to think of what A Simple Favor. I actually watched this the other night just to kind of refresh my memory on Paul Feig films, and trying to think of how that could work as a sequel.
I'm not really sure either, but I would certainly be there for it.
Yeah, that was definitely a different tone than this, and a lot of what Feig has done. I think that was his first film after this run with Melissa McCarthy, actually. But still really putting women at the forefront, which I love. I mean, like I said, the modern day George Cukor, making films with women, for women, by women in some cases. So yeah, I mean, A Simple Favor really, I think, kind of shows the range that Paul Feig has, which is
that's
great.
true. That's not really comedy in any way. It's very much a suspense thriller, and really works and plays off of the idea that, and that's the thing too. The reason I bring it up is it kind of ties into the idea that what Paul Feig saw in Jason Statham is that his persona allowed you to play off of that persona, you kind of knowing him and making that work in terms of comedy. Whereas in this movie, we all see Anna Kendrick in a certain way from seeing her in Pitch Perfect, and we kind of think of her as cute and perky and all of that, all those things we ascribe to her characters. And this movie uses that to kind of play off of that idea and turn it on its head, and lets her go off in a way that you don't necessarily expect, which is really, really fun. So I love the idea of taking characters and playing with the expectations you have for them. And that's what he did with her in this, like he did with Statham in Spy. So
yeah, the more we talk about these different films of Paul Feig's, I'm really realizing just how versatile he is. I always imagine him as a comedy director, but there's so much to him. And he actually goes on to make a Christmas movie in 2019.
Last Christmas, that was not a TV film.
Is it good?
Oh man, that's really hard to say. So it's got good people in it. I mean, Emilia Clarke is really good, and Henry Golding is he's a charming actor.
Oh, and in A Simple Favor.
Yeah, and is well cast in that. But I think it just depends on how much. Yeah, I don't want to spoil the movie for anybody, but it really depends on how much mileage you want to get out of a certain trope.
I don't think anybody would mind if you spoil Last Christmas.
But yeah, weaves the idea is I think that it weaves the Last Christmas song by Wham. It like used almost as a tribute to like George Michael. So George Michael's music kind of weaves throughout the whole movie. So one, it depends on how much mileage you get out of movies based on George Michael songs, but also how much mileage you get out of movies about ghosts, I guess. Sorry to spoil it for those that haven't seen it. But that's about it. And it's fine. I always kind of watch one or two terrible Christmas movies every year, usually romantic comedy based. I don't know why. It's like 2 a.m. and I'll throw it on and I'll watch.
They're fun.
And this one, it's fine. I don't think I'd watch it again, but it was okay.
I'll put it in my queue for this holiday season.
Yeah, next Christmas, you can throw it in. It's fine.
Yeah. All right, we're going to wrap up. Since we're talking about Paul Feig, just because I want to mention this, we're looking at his filmography. One of the things he did for TV, which is, I think, incredibly under the radar, he worked on a couple episodes of a show called Bored to Death on HBO, which is, it starred Jason Statham and Zach Galifianakis in an early role, and Ted Danson.
Wait, you just said it starred Jason Statham.
Oh, boy, that would be a different show altogether. It stars Jason Schwartzman. I'm telling you, I Statham on the brain. What if we recast Statham in everything? Maybe that's something to do in our wrap-up episode. But yeah, this show is created by the author Jonathan Ames, who is fantastic, and it was on HBO. I don't know, early to mid 2010s. Very short-lived, but just a lot of fun. It was kind of a detective show. So if you haven't seen that, good work by Paul Feig and everybody else involved. I recommend checking it out. And on that note, unless you have anything else, I think we're done.
No, I think this is good. I think we can wrap it up there. I don't want to give people the entire movie so they can go watch it.
We both highly recommend Spy, so please do go watch it. I'm sure you can find it on streaming. And next week we wrap up our Jason Statham month with a pretty exciting double feature. We're gonna discuss his work with Guy Ritchie and look at Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch I have to say, I saw Snatch before Lock, Stock, and I think that's where I first discovered Jason Statham. So that really set the bar high for me, and he hasn't disappointed since.
Yeah, I'm excited to get back to watching those two. I haven't seen them in a very long time. So
Yeah, and I think sort of like middle of the road Statham, if I remember correctly. Kind of funny, kind of action packed. So like early iterations of Crank in some ways, I guess. There's a little cheekiness, but they're still action based, or at least like mob based. So gonna be fun. Look forward to that. And yeah, so in the meantime, if you want to check us out online. We are Movie Throwdown Pod all over social media, and you can follow us at patreon.com/Movie Throwdown Pod, where you can find all kinds of fun stuff and be part of our family. So until next week, keep watching Jason Statham movies, and we'll see you next time. So long.